It's been a long time since I actually did a bit of a walkthrough or a speed edit or anything on some digital art. So I thought today I would jump over into Photoshop and I will show you how I took this image. So I'm going to show you how I took this image, which is just a photo of the model in the studio, to this piece of digital art in Photoshop with lots of layers and all sorts of tips and tricks along the way. So hi, I'm Julie, welcome to the channel. I love to share all sorts of things with Photoshop and various other software programs. I also go into product reviews and how-to guides and all sorts of tips and tricks to make your photos everything you want them to be. So let's jump into it. Okay, so I opened my image up into Photoshop. I then cropped it to, I think it was like, I do like sort of this type of ratio, which is 8.5 by 11. You could do 8 by 10. You could do whatever you like. So I did it that way. I then, using my selection tool, I selected the area where my model is standing on the grey, and then I just inversed it and I wanted to fill everything else just with grey, just so I had a basic area to start with. I had a great layout to start with, just neutral grey, easy to work with. I then, jumping up, I actually cut out, so I used the selection tool to select my model and I put him on his own layer, and I did reduce the size of him a little bit. As you can see from there, this is the original one and I reduced it a little bit. I then dropped back to that layer and I put in just a photo that I have just in my archives, just of some lovely blue sky, a few clouds and this grass area here, and I've used this a few times. What I went in and did just with on the layer mask was there was a little bit I had to clean up on the model, but I also went in with a grass brush and just painted the grass over his legs. So if I turned that off, he's just going to be standing there, and I didn't like that. I wanted him to look like he was sort of walking through the grass. Ended up putting this little rabbit in his pocket, and I put a drop shadow on there. So if you go into your FX panel, it's just a drop shadow set to multiply, just a dark color, fairly basic, and did it that way. Next, if I zoom out, so I had this light, which again is in my stash. Then I put these little clocks in, so there's clock 1 and clock 2, and they are little wings which I have added a motion blur to. So if I click on the wing, I just went into blur, went to motion blur, and I just put a little bit of different motion on it. I could come and add some more motion to it, just so it looked like they were sort of fluttering in the breeze a little bit. Then again, from my stash, I had these clouds, so it's the same one that I've put in, but I've just changed the size of it a little bit. I had these skeleton trees, which I put in again from my stash. I had this owl again from my stash. A lot of these are not my own images. The original background and the original model photo are mine, but a lot of it is just elements that I have. I had this glass jar. Again, I used the grass brush over the top just so it looks like it's sitting in the grass. I added these fish. I added this splash, which is set to screen. So if it's just on normal, it's just a photo of a water splash on black, so just on screen. Same with the bubbles, that was black and just set to screen. If you put anything that's got a black background set to screen, the black will disappear. If you've got something on a white background, if you set it to multiply, the white will disappear. Then I added this ladder, which sort of did make the jar go a little bit strange. So this was using the AI. So I asked it to put a ladder leaning against the glass jar. The fact that it changed the shape of the glass jar doesn't really bother me. I could go and round this side off, but I never ended up doing that. But anyway, so then I added in some wheat, and it's just the same thing. I've just duplicated it 3 times. I had 2 on the left and 1 on the right, just so that it was sort of centering everything out. The fact that they're not 2 of everything is always a good thing. I then did a color balance, which looks a bit strange here, but I sort of liked it and then decided that I didn't like the color quite so much, so I started playing around with it. I added a light glow, which is just a gradient, so it's just a round gradient that I added in. I've got that set to screen at 76%, so it's white and blue through to nothing. I then I've got a fairy brush, and I put these little dots and speckles all over it and added a color to it, added some extra brightness to it. I then decided that I really wasn't that happy with the color, so I started playing around with different gradient maps. And then I went and did a channel mixer. I then merged the image together and I took it into Topaz Library. So if I come in here, now I'm just going to hit merge, so that's Control Alt Shift and E, and I go to filter and I go to Topaz, and I'm going to go to Impressions 2. Now if you haven't played with it before, I'm sure there are lots of different things you can use. I'm not even sure if Topaz have impressions available in Studio anymore. So this is an old product, so I don't want to go too deeply into it, but I can do a lot of different painting effects. So I can have a Cezanne or coloured pencils or Degas or Georgia O'Keeffe. There's all sorts of different ones, and these are just my favourites. And I think I went with Monet in the end, and then when you click on it, you can then go in and you can edit all that as well. So I'm just going to cancel out of that. But I didn't want the glass jar and my model and owl and that to be so painterly. So I put a mask on and masked them out a little bit. I then also bought my light bulb from below. So I did a copy from down here and dragged it up to the top. I then added my light glow again. So remember, that's just a radial gradient. I then also dragged up a copy of that cloud, and I have dropped the opacity down to sort of, it's 59% here. I then did a brightness contrast, and I then did a effect that I've done a few times. So what I did, I merged all the image onto one. I went into my blur filter and went to Gaussian blur, and I took it all the way to the end so that it's this, I've just got the colors and tones, and then I can set that. At this one I've set to multiply, but I could set to soft light, overlay. You can set to any of the blend modes, and then you can adjust the opacity as you require. And that, my friends, is the final image. So if you would like to learn more about using Photoshop, I've actually got a class. It's a little bit older, but most of it's still relevant. So if you're interested, I'll pop the link down below and you can have a play with that. But feel free to jump into my Photoshop 101 collection, and I have got dozens and dozens of videos on how to do all sorts of things in Photoshop going back years. So feel free to jump into that, and I will also link some of the videos for that as well. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.